Uh, Welcome to meeting number 2 of the Standing Committee on Citizenship and Immigration. As we start this important Larissa Bezo, President and Chief Executive Officer, Canadian Bureau for International Education, and also Francis Brown Mastropaolo, Director, International Affairs, Federation de CIMM, and Paul Davidson, President and Chief Executive Officer, and also Marc LeBlanc, the Senior Government and International Relations Officer from Universities Canada. Mr. Davidson is having some problem logging in, so the clerk will do that while we hear from the first 2 witnesses. So before we begin, I would just like to make a few comments for the benefit of all the witnesses. Before speaking, please wait until I recognize your name. When you're ready to speak, you can click on the microphone icon to activate your mic. A reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. Interpretation in this video conference will work very much like a regular committee meeting. When speaking, please speak slowly and clearly. When you are not speaking, your mic should be on mute. I would like to welcome all our witnesses who will begin our discussions with 5 minutes of opening remarks, followed by the round of questioning. So all the witnesses will have 5 minutes for their opening remarks. We will now proceed first to Madame Bezo, President and Chief Executive Officer for Canadian Bureau for International Education. Madame Bezo, floor is yours. You have 5 minutes for your opening remarks. You can please proceed.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you so much for the opportunity to contribute to these important deliberations. I'm connecting to you virtually from Ottawa, the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe. CBIE's 150-plus member institutions reflect the full spectrum of Canada's education, from K-12 to PhD, spanning almost 2 million students. We are immensely proud of Canada's status as the destination of choice for international students, and we are acutely aware of the need to protect, maintain, and where possible, to enhance Canada's standing in a fiercely competitive global market. Accordingly, we commend the committee's interest in shedding light on how student visa applications are processed, including why rejection rates differ across Canadian visa offices and how we can do better to keep these rejection rates as low as possible. Because each rejection letter is not only personally devastating for the student who has successfully qualified for admission to a Canadian institution, each rejection also arguably represents a failure of process, a waste of resources for the student and the host institution, a loss of opportunity for the community where the student planned to study, and fewer chances to leverage the people-to-people ties that come through education to promote Canada's long-term global engagement and future prosperity. The problem is growing, and Canada's rejection rate for student visa applications has increased in recent years, and it is especially concerning in specific country and regional contexts, Africa and Francophone Africa in particular. We need to be mindful that these failures of process do not end up being interpreted by potential international student candidates as failures of respect. The reputational risks for Canada brand are significant. Canada's IE sector has seen exponential growth in recent years, increasing by some 135% since 2009. And this has occurred against the backdrop of an increasingly ambitious immigration program and more recently the pandemic. To cope, IRCC has had to change gears and increase their reliance on technology to help process applications. Unfortunately, student visa rejection rates have increased in lockstep with this growth, from 31% overall in 2016 to 53% in 2020. And the growing disconnect between policy ambition and processing capacity is hard to ignore. While it's important to pay attention to rejection rates for study permits, we strongly encourage the committee to consider the interconnectedness of this problem with the wider issues of policy coherence and integration across Canada's international education sector. There are 3 issues I want to touch on very briefly. First, what we are hearing from our institutions is that there are some troubling disconnects in the current system. We are aware that many well-qualified students have had their permit applications rejected, over 500,000 since 2016. Student study permit approval rates in some Canadian visa processing centres overseas have been and remain extremely low, despite official policy direction through the International Education Strategy that Canada diversify its source countries for international students. Discretion is clearly being exercised, as it should be, given Canada's legitimate national interest concerns and to select students who have the best chance of succeeding. But where and how this discretion is being exercised is often opaque. At a minimum, we need to ensure some level of consistency across visa centers so that we can test and validate that where discretion is being applied, it is being done fairly and in a way that reflects Canadian values and Government of Canada priorities. Second, with regard to dual intent, we encourage the committee to take a strong position on this issue.
Sorry for interrupting. We lost your voice.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Chair. Are you able to hear me?
Yeah, you can proceed.
Okay. Second, with regard to dual intent, we encourage the committee to take a strong position on this issue. Dual intent is a simple concept that acknowledges the reality that many international students might want to both complete their study programs in Canada and then remain here to live and work. It lets them declare upfront their plans to do so without creating the perverse incentives our current system has for them to misrepresent their intentions. Indeed, if it is the stated policy of the Government of Canada to address our demographic deficit through immigration and to attract the best and brightest
You have a
young
minute
minds
left.
to Canada, let us create a program that formally acknowledges and encourages this type of candidate. And with regard to dual intent, there is a broader need for a more integrated and sustainable approach.
If I can interrupt you, Ms. Bezo, like Madame Normandine.
On a des problèmes de traduction.
Sorry, unfortunately, we're not able to hear the translation.
Okay, we will just like have a look.
Madame Bezos, could I ask you to say a few words from your...
Sure, yes. It's a pleasure to be here this morning. I'm hoping that you can hear me clearly.
Can you hear me, Madame Normandine? Can everyone hear? Okay. Madame Bezo, you can please proceed. We will give you a minute to finish your presentation. So if you can start. Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My final point is we need to be more upfront about our intentions, about how we better inform students' visa screening processes. We need ESDC to engage more effectively with industry, provinces, and territories and community service organizations to identify labor market priorities that improve and inform those policies. And as we move ahead, we need IRCC to take some practical steps to improve its training, including placing an explicit focus on intercultural competence training, meaningfully assessing algorithms currently being used for screening applicants for unintended bias, and explore the confluence of factors that explain why some visa offices have high refusal rates. In closing, we would really encourage the committee to explore benefits and risks about implementing an entirely new pathway for international students that allows those who want to go study in Canada and eventually stay after graduation. Simply tweaking the current temporary visa framework is not enough, and we need some bold and innovative thinking here which complements our immigration goals and something that makes a strong statement that is not business as usual in Canada. And our members are keen to engage on this issue. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Madam Bezo. We will now proceed to Mr. Francis Brown Mastropialo. Mr. Mastropialo, floor is yours. You will have 5 minutes for your opening remarks. You can please proceed.
Merci.
Thank you very much. Hello. I would like to thank the members of the committee for inviting me today. I'm here for the Quebec CIGEPS that represents 195 students, 7,000 international students, 30 of whom come from French-speaking African country. Welcoming international students is a priority for CIGEPS, and it's important for international attraction to contribute to Canada's objective. A recent study indicates that our members consider immigration procedures to be the main obstacle to international recruitment. This is especially true for students coming from the main recruitment pools in Francophone Africa. The rate of refusal for study permits for applicants from these countries has been very high over the several years, and thousands of students have been blocked from being admitted to our institutions. Between 2015 and 2020, refusal rates for 13 countries reached up to 80% for several countries, with a regional average above 65%. No other region in the world compares. For example, the major recruiting pools of India and China had the average rejection rates of 35% and 17% respectively. These exceptional refusal rates indicate that unfavorable treatment is being applied to candidates from these countries and to applicants who want to study at a CIGIP. The refusal rates by level of education for the same region shows a clear trend. Refusal rates are significantly higher at the CIGIP level, while they decrease for the graduate level at university. 2020 was particularly worrisome for CIGIPs. Refusal rates range from 85% to 100% for the majority of countries in sub-Saharan Africa. CIGIPs feel that the situation suffers both from a systematic perspective of immigration process toward these countries and a lack of understanding of the Canadian educational system. Clearly, the members of the Federation and the CIGIPs are questioning possible biases and operational issues in the immigration system that could explain such a disastrous result. The recent growth in denial rates is forcing us to question the use of automated application processing systems such as the Chinook system. In addition, it appears that the redistribution in 2020 of files from French-speaking Africa to the processing centers outside that region has had an impact on refusal rates, contributing to their refuse. This situation has significant impacts on CIGIPs and the communities they serve. This is a humanitarian and CIGIPs are investing. And this is true in Quebec, everywhere, and especially outside of major centers. And it is important for their mission of education and social, cultural, and economic development. Communities do not benefit from the presence of these students, and there also is an impact related to the inconsistency between student permit denials and other government initiatives. Canada invests more than $7 million per year in promotion of it as a study destination, and Quebec invests close to $15 million in attraction and scholarships for international students at the CEGEP level alone. While this is the institution's management that proceeds to admit students after a serious analysis, it is more often the immigration officers who pronounces on the validity of the individual's background. This impact means that it treats different countries differently, and image-based diplomacy is just to show that has its limits, especially for a youth that will quickly look elsewhere. In conclusion, if the problem of refusal rates for study permits is national, it is particularly damaging for CEGIPs and for the Canadian Francophone community as a whole. It seems that the actor responsible for migration procedure is by himself capable of thwarting the efforts of governments, institutions, above all the French-speaking African students. We believe that it is essential that the processing of study permits be equitable, fair, and transparent for all individuals, regardless of their country, language, or level of education. We invite the committee to shed light on the processes underway and to analyze the reasons for the rejection rates of French-speaking African countries, verifying whether they're victims of biases as outlined. The RCC wishes to integrate a new permit processing system. It is a priority that these systems do not replicate the defects we currently found. We remain open to working with the committee and the IRCC on these issues, and particularly finding a solution to the problems raised here. Thank you.
I would now like to welcome Paul Davidson. He's the president for the Universities Canada. Welcome, Mr. Davidson. You can please...
Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
It's good to have you here. You can please proceed. You will have 5 minutes for your opening remarks, and then we will go into the round of questioning. So, Mr. Davidson.
Thanks very much, Madam. Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you to the IT team of the House of Commons for getting me online so well. It's great to be with you today, and on behalf of Universities Canada and our members, thank you for the invitation to speak with you. Thanks also to every member of this committee for the extraordinary work that all parliamentarians are continuing to do in these very challenging times. With me today is Marc Leblanc, who leads our international relations work. I had the pleasure of appearing before this committee last April to discuss the Temporary Foreign Workers Program. And as you may recall, Universities Canada represents 96 universities across the country. Taken together, Canada's universities are a $38 billion enterprise employing over 300,000 people. And universities are often the largest employer in their communities. Universities are social and economic anchors in these difficult times, and they are catalysts. Canada's universities are an integral part of the Team Canada approach to responding to COVID-19, from mitigating risk to developing a vaccine and accelerating Canada's social and economic recovery. Maintenant que les frontières rouvriront,
Now that borders are opening and Canada can welcome foreign students, we would like to calibrate with this committee to be able to ensure that Canada remains a destination for talent.
I don't think interpretation is
Mr.
working
Davidson.
properly. I'm hearing both French and English equally loud on my.
that was my problem. I'm sorry, I did not have the floor mic on. If
Oh.
I can repeat. Maintenant que
Can
les
you please
frontières-
say a few sentences? Mr. Davidson, if you can say
Oui.
2 sentences so that we can check.
Maintenant que les frontières rouvrent,
Now that borders are reopening and Canada can welcome foreign students, we would like to be able to work with the committee to ensure.
Okay, that's good. Mr. Davidson, you can please proceed.
je souhaite aujourd'hui vous
Today, I would like to be able to take you how we can attract talent and help us to go ahead economically.
mention that today's global competition for talent is the 21st century gold rush. La concurrence mondiale s'intensifie.
International competition is intensifying. For Canada to remain a good destination, we will have to work hard to get the best minds.
Student program to make coming to Canada attractive to highly skilled individuals. International students contribute over $22 billion to the Canadian economy and support over 218,000 jobs. They also play a fundamental role in building Canada's highly skilled talent pipeline. For international students, borders are reopening around the world, providing more choice than even just 2 years ago. Canada has a global brand as diverse and welcoming with world-class institutions, and we're seeing more international students arriving from emerging markets. These strengths must be leveraged as the global competition heats up. It will also be critical that our immigration system remains competitive. In the coming months, we look forward to working with this committee to ensure timely and accurate visa processing in key markets and building a more applicant-friendly experience. A more urgent challenge that we need to address is the high visa refusal rates in many of our priority markets, particularly in Francophone Africa. We greatly appreciate the work of this committee to examine this issue in greater detail. On average, the largest international source countries for university enrollment see about an 80% approval rate, with some countries as high as 95%. However, some of the top African source countries for Canadian university students show lower approval rates for study permits. In 2019, the visa approval rate for undergraduate students from Morocco and Senegal, 2 of our priority countries for Francophone student recruitment, the approval rate was 55% and 20% respectively, versus 85 and 95% in other markets. High refusal rates have a direct impact on our recruitment efforts and on Canada's brand as a welcoming place to study and build a life. We recognize that universities have a role to play in addressing this issue, and we're ready to work with the federal government, provincial governments, and others to help ensure our prospective students meet the necessary requirements to receive favorable decisions on their study permits. Pour réussir le gouvernement fédéral, les gouvernements provinciaux.
The universities, different levels of government have to work together to be able to have a collaborative effort to attract people to students. And this will help to get greater numbers of rolling in Canadian universities and will allow them to benefit, Canada benefit from the presence of these students. We appreciate the work of the committee to help Canada recover from COVID-19, and we would like to continue to work with this partnership.
We look forward to working with this committee throughout the Parliament to ensure that it remains a top destination for international students from around the world.
Thank you, Mr. Davidson. Now we have heard from all 3 witnesses. We will now proceed to our round of questioning, and we will start with our first round of 6 minutes each, and we will start with MP Gordon. MP Gordon, you have 6 minutes. You can please.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Alors...
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm very pleased to be back in the committee, and my first question would be from Mr. Brown. that is easier to pronounce than Mastro Paulo. I hope I pronounced it correctly. You said in your introduction that the origin of countries that is an that influences the decision. My question is clear. Maybe it is the country of origin, but there may be other criteria that could influence the decision. Is it the language that means that there's delays for processing the applications? And Mr. Davidson from Universities Canada said that there is an economic impact, but there's also a development or an interest in developing a French language capacity in Canada. Your question is interesting. What we see, and we base ourselves on the statistics that we get. So yes, you can see that for refusals rates, sometimes it is the language of the individual or the language of use in the country. I think that IRCC should be asked the question directly. But what we can see with respect to the country of origin and the reasons for the refusal rates, well, if you look at those for Francophone countries, for CEGEP, Francophone CEGEPs, the refusal rate for our whole network is a problem, and it is even more so for the Francophone CEGEPs. Another question. I would like to know which countries do we compete with in order to attract students, immigration students, both Anglophone and Francophone. Mr. Davidson was mentioning that really it was like a gold rush for the 21st century when it comes to foreign students. So we're competing with other countries. So can you identify who do you feel you're in competition with in terms of attracting foreign students? Well, our competition, if you think about the whole network in Canada, colleges and universities, the whole network, and there has been research done, and it's important to note that you have to adapt to individual. With respect to competition of other countries, well, of course, France has means, of course, that are greater than the means of Canada for international promotion, and there are other destinations, whether Switzerland, Belgium, Germany, those are our competitors, the direct competitors. Next question will be from Mr. Davidson. Mr. Davidson, you mentioned it earlier that it is a gold rush of sorts for the 21st century with the question of attracting foreign students who will come and participate in the development of Canada. Tomorrow morning, you'll be speaking to the IRCC. And so what would be the first measure that you would suggest to improve the system?
And to build from your last question, France is obviously a very key competitor country with regard to the Francophone market.
Madame la Présidente, je n'ai pas
The brand is very
d'interprétation.
strong.
Mr. Davidson, if I can just stop you. There's some interpretation issue. Let us have a look.
Okay.
Mr. Davidson, could you repeat what you just said, please?
Yes, I would just say I'm building on the previous question from Mr. Godin to my colleague witness that France is absolutely a competitive nation for us in terms of attracting Francophone students. They've got a very powerful brand, they've got historic roots, and they're very aggressive attracting Francophone students to France. And that's important for all of Canada's universities as well, in Quebec and beyond Quebec, to attract French-speaking students. In minority Francophone communities across the country, French-speaking students are a very valuable asset, not only to the educational enterprise, but also to the economic growth of the region. With regard to the broader competition in the Anglophone markets, the US, the UK, and Australia are our biggest competition, and they spend vastly larger sums on marketing their brand. And so we are in regular dialogue with IRCC on a number of issues. One is, how do we build a stronger Canadian brand? Because people think of nation first when they think of where they want to study. The second, we've got a very positive, non-partisan, all-partisan a policy environment that welcomes international students. We've got good policies. We need to improve our operational realities on the ground in the markets we're trying to attract students from. And so we're working with IRCC in key markets to say, how do we improve their staff's knowledge of the work that's being done? And how do we ensure we have high quality, high integrity, and quick visa processing? It's really important. I mentioned some of the refusal rates that our members have, that the prospective students have. And universities go to a great deal of effort and expense to raise the profile and recruit these students. And if they're refused for head-scratching reasons, we've lost investment, we've lost the potential of that student. We want to make sure that we have a world-class student attraction system.
Merci, Monsieur Davidson.
Thank you, Mr. Davidson. You mentioned that for nebulous reasons, their refusal, and you spoke about Morocco and Senegal, where there are high rejection rates for the applications. How do you read the situation? I'd like to hear you with respect to the French phenomenon and the rejection rates that have been shown by the study concerning the massive rejection of African Francophones. So there is a problem there, and I'd like to hear how you experience it in the field.
MP Gordon, your time is up. Maybe you'll have to hear back in next round of questioning. We will now proceed to MP Al-Khoury. You have 6 minutes for your round of questioning. You can please proceed.
Merci, Madame la Présidente, et bienvenue.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and welcome to our guests. My first question, it will be for Mr. Blanc. Mr. Blanc, you know how hard it is to apply to come study in Canada. There are financial criteria, and there are issues with respect to immigration. Quebec determines the economic status in terms of accepting a student. For a student 18 years of age, have to show that they have the financial resources of roughly $13,000 a year compared to $10,000 elsewhere in Canada. So my question is the following. Do you think that that has an impact on the acceptance rate for students at the post-secondary level in Quebec? And also, I would like to know if you have made any representations within to the Quebec government to be able to change that they would be able to set the rate at 10,000 in Quebec rather than 13,000. Well, thank you very much for the question. Well, it would be important to not hide the true reasons that are behind the high refusal rates. And I think that there's a question of the rates, whether it's 10,000 or 13,000, it doesn't really make a difference, actually. And so what we really see is that the refusal rates, refusal for students, the same rate is for students whether they are under a scholarship or excellency, and they will receive $14,000 a year for their years of study, and they don't pay they don't pay for their school fees. And so you have to look at the CIMM side where there is a refusal. So I don't think it's really a question of priority, this question of financial capacity. I think that we have to look rather. We've seen the refusal rates for the CIGEPs. We've done the necessary comparisons. So now we know the most popular reasons for refusal. And I think if you look at the refusal rates and the reasons that are mentioned, and sometimes there may be many reasons for the same students, I think that the priority that we need as a nation is to look at the immigration system and the analysis that is done, and whether the immigration officers really are aware and are knowledgeable of the education system in Canada. Do they understand what the reality of these students is, the students that want to study abroad, and why for some institutions the refusal rates are higher? So I think we have to look at the statistics to do a precise diagnosis of the problem before we look at an operational mechanics that would look at the shared competencies between the federal and the provincial. Thank you. My second question is for Madame Bezot. Madame, following the pandemic, COVID-19, different applications for international students for their visas are still being processed. Can you compare the situation before the COVID pandemic to what is happening now when it comes to processing times? And secondly, following the statistics in Canada, we know that a foreign student at a university pays 3 times more than a Canadian student here. And so that may be an obstacle for students, for international students. So have you looked at trying to get the universities to reduce the rates, tuition fees for foreign students?
Yes, in terms of looking at the trends and the experiences pre-pandemic versus throughout this pandemic period, there are certainly some notable differences. As I mentioned in my opening comments, certainly from a processing standpoint, given public health measures, given limitations in terms of being able to access visa processing centers and supporting documentation, we certainly saw a slowing down, in fact, a halting of the processing of those applications in the early days of the pandemic. And there's certainly been an effort on the to ramp that up since that time. Based on the numbers that we are seeing, overall, our international education sector has recovered in terms of the overall numbers that we saw pre-pandemic.
1 minute left.
2019. And so from that perspective, I think, we're very much encouraged. However, as I mentioned, 500,000 have been rejected since 2016 who've applied in those processes. And so I concur with my colleagues, Paul and Francis, there is more work operationally to be done to clear those pathways and to address some of those issues and perhaps unpack any systemic issues that may be standing in the way of that. With respect to the actual tuition fees, yes, this certainly is an area of sensitivity, and we have been working with institutions, not only in terms of trying to think about those talent pipelines and ways in which we can move students into the Canadian context, but trying to be sensitive in terms of the ways in which the value of that Canadian education is positioned. However, I can share with you CBIE's most recent international student survey in December of 2019 received 40,000 plus international student responses, those that are currently in Canada, and they continue to cite the high quality of the Canadian education system as one of the most desirable
If you can
elements,
wrap up,
for those
please,
who
your
choose to
time is up.
study.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. We will now proceed to MP Brunel Desap. MP Brunel Desap, you will have 6 minutes. You can please proceed.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente. Tout d'abord, merci.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you to the witnesses for being here this morning. It's a very important subject that we care a lot about. We heard the Conservatives talking about competition and other issues. So I think that we're talking about human beings here that have dreams that are taken away from them, and because there's a problem here, and the problem is where it's difficult for the francophones. It doesn't matter where they're from. So I do hope that we'll be able to find some solutions, and so that we see things change for 2022. Mr. Marleau, I thank you very much for your opening remarks. You spoke about statistics, but there is the human portrait here. So I think it would be important to give us, tell us how a francophone student, what are the steps that they go for when they have to deal with a refusal. Well, thank you very much for the question and for the opportunity to show this difficult route that international students have to take. I'll give you an example. Mina, for example, from the Cameroon, who wants to participate, who did represented, saw people in Cameroon at a fair, people from Global Affairs Canada, and so she went through the orientation process, and she was accepted into the university of choice, and then she was able to get a $14,000 scholarship from the Quebec government once she gets this acceptance, then she will find around the end of April she has to complete her application for visas, and then no news for 20 weeks. And so the CIGEP tries to reassure them, and then it's once classes have started, and it's around the 25th of August, but it wasn't until September that she gets her refusal from IRCC. So what are the reasons? Well, sometimes the officer doesn't believe that the student will go back to Cameroon after their studies, and the officer doesn't feels that this program is not really realistic with respect to other educational possibilities that are available locally. So you really need to ask some questions. So how would the officer be able to judge whether or not the student will return to Cameroon, especially when there are many incentives for even foreign students to remain in Canada? So how can this officer really judge the academic reality in Cameroon with respect to the studies available there? And so it's impossible for them to compare the Cameroon education system and the Canadian one. So first of all, she has to be able to convince her parents to let her go, and then she gets her scholarship, and then she has to give up the project, and she won't necessarily understand why. And so the CIGEP doesn't understand either, and that's really the problem. We really don't understand why these refusals are happening. So when we see this, so many good candidates, and we think that they should be able to succeed, we're wondering why are they being refused. And so things will be, the situation will change. It will no longer become a dream to go to Canada. It would rather be a false dream issue where it's a difficult process, and so there are thousands of French-speaking African students that would like to come. And there are fairs trying to get them to come also. Well, thank you very much. I think it's important to let Mr. Mastropaolo respond completely. Do I still have time left?
Seconds.
Oh, super. OK. Rapidement.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. You spoke about the impact of refusals for the student visas. So can you tell us what type of impact does it have on Canada's reputation and on the offers that are available from Quebec? Well, for Canada, the reputational effect is that really there's a lack of trust that is happening. So we have to try and recover trust and to rebuild our reputation. And so for the CIGEPs, they're really wondering how whether or not they should participate in any Canadian activities when they're trying to attract foreign students, because they end up with refusals afterward. And so the impact for the CIGEP, well, for international students, it's only 3% of our student population, and without those students, it would be 37 programs that are at risk in the CIGEPs if they don't have international students. So the problem is not a matter of attracting them. It's when you want to increase in the number of international students and when you want to diversify. So it's really in terms of the difficulty for the educational institutions, and the problem is that we're not able to diversify in terms of where we're bringing in students from.
Thank you. We will now proceed to MP Kwan. MP Kwan, you have 6 minutes for your round of questioning. You can please proceed.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses for their expertise and presentations. First, I'd like to put my question to Ms. Bezo. You mentioned in your opening remarks about the issue of dual intent. Indeed, there is dual intent that exists, especially for family reunification. But yet, even in that stream, we're seeing a lot of rejections on the premise that the immigration official who assesses the applications, that they deemed the visit from the spouse is such that they would not return to their home country because of dual intent. So, so with respect to students in this instance, the notion that yes, students want to come and study, and some may want to stay, but it does not necessarily mean to say that they would violate their immigration requirements and not return home. So from that perspective, as IRCC takes these items into consideration, would you suggest that the government should actually make it clear that unless if there is a history of violation of immigration rules, that the person should not be automatically rejected because somehow IRCC officials deem that they would not return home?
Thank you for the question. And I guess from our perspective, if we're really thinking about the strategic potential that comes from that pathway and that pipeline, from our perspective, we would strongly recommend that we think outside of the box on this and really, rather than work within that temporary visa framework that exists and thinking about that pathway for those who may choose to stay and for whom Canada would want to open the door to that possibility, looking at this as perhaps an entirely new pathway that would allow us to explore an explicit opportunity for students who both want to study and then remain after graduation, from our perspective, would be much more strategic and allow us as a country to really identify those gaps in those areas. I mean, we hear very clearly, for example, from our business leaders that we need to be recruiting and growing new talent to be competitive globally. You know, we're hearing that the viability of our research institutions, our knowledge industries, key sectors depend on an influx of that top global talent. We're hearing from ESDC that we're facing severe skill shortages in critical growth sectors. And so from our perspective, I think we see this as a very strategic moment in time in thinking about our country's future prosperity and our future global connectedness, to really step outside of that existing framework and say, no, in fact, we'd like to open the door to a more explicit framework, and that there's space, and I think our institutions are certainly keen to be part of that solution in thinking about how we innovate around this and create a much bolder pathway that aligns and complements our nation's overall immigration goals. And I think that's critically important to really think about this from a much more strategic standpoint and the future state.
If I could just jump in here, do you mean to say that IRCC should bring in a new stream for international students, not only just to study here, but to stay here, to get permanent resident status? Is that what you mean?
Yes, I think there's absolute merit in considering that and not applying and using that much more limiting temporary framework. I think we need to think very differently and much more boldly about how we chart that future path for the country. And this would signal that significantly.
Some have argued that what students should be able to attain is this principle: good enough to study here, good enough to stay. Is that what you're suggesting?
I think they're great to study here and absolutely in our strategic interest to stay. And so let us think strategically about how we create that path. I think our education institutions are keen to innovate around this, and I think we have a unique opportunity as a country in this moment.
Thank you. I'd like to turn to Mr. Mastropolo. Is that correct, the way I'm pronouncing your name? I hope it is.
Yes, it's fine. It's fine.
Thank you. I'd like to ask you the same question on the issue around dual intent and the issue around rejection, not saying that IRCC should not automatically reject just because they think someone would not return, even if there's no history of violation of immigration rules.
Effectivement, la raison de double intention.
The double intent for us has several aspects. And you might think it is easy in terms of choosing the candidates, but there's an incentive for students to remain if they graduate here, but also they may want to come temporarily or as a permanent resident. And so with the question of when a person may be asking for refugee status following that, some that would be more from India and China, and that would be English-speaking students. And so the question of the double intent, I don't think it's really relevant at this point.
All right. Then let me ask you this question. Along the lines of where Ms. Basil was saying that IRCC should be bringing forward a new immigration stream, and that is to say for students who come and then also provide them with permanent resident status as a new stream. Is that something that you would call for or support?
Il faudrait s'y pencher un peu plus.
Well, I think we'd have to study that in depth. For us, it's not a one dimension to the solution. I think an analysis needs to be done with all of those involved, both with the IRCC and as well as the institution, to see what would be the best way to improve the approval rates.
You mentioned
Ms. Kwan, your time is up. Okay. So we will now proceed to our second round of questioning, and we will start our second round with Mr. Seebeck. Mr. Seebeck, floor is yours. You will have 5 minutes.
I'm actually going to give my time to Mr. Gaudin.
Merci, cher collègue.
Thank you. Madam Chair, I have a question for the three witnesses, and it's about the objective of the study. It's for the rate of recruitment and acceptance of foreign students in Canada. This, I think, was motivated by the negative portrait we have of the situation. So I would like to hear what you have to say as to whether Canada is losing their leadership and attractive position for the training of foreign students. They're losing their position as a leader, and especially for Francophone students. So I would like to hear you. Maybe we could start with Madame Bezos and then Mr. Davidson, and then lastly, I'll call you Mr. Francis. It's easier.
Monsieur Brown. Alors, Madame Bezos.
Madame Bezos.
Thank you for the question. Yes, in fact, with the rates of rejection that we are seeing, in particular, much more prevalent in Africa and in Francophone Africa, that certainly is serving as a limitation in terms of that pathway for students to come and to study. And that's not even to speak about, further pathways that might exist post-graduation. So this does represent a lost opportunity. As I had shared initially, broadly speaking, if not to distill down to the potential Francophone students, broadly for the country, we are speaking about 500,000 rejections since 2016. This is a very substantive number of prospective individuals who have the opportunity to make a difference, whether that be in a Canadian community, whether that be in an international community context.
Merci, Madame Bezos.
Thank you, Madame Bezos. I'm sorry that I have very little time, so I understand for you. This is something you've noted. So, Mr. Davidson, quickly, I do have another question also for you. So, Mr. Davidson, what's your position?
We are in a very competitive world, and so we have to be at our absolute top of the game. I think two things to keep in mind. One is that Africa is still an emerging market for many countries, and so we have an opportunity to be best in class and to attract the best students that we can. The second thing, and I just want to underscore it because it came up earlier, was that to keep in mind that international students create opportunities for Canadian students. They broaden the choice of programs that they can study. They broaden the opportunities for Canadian students to learn. And so it's in our economic interest, it's in our education interest to make sure we have the best student attraction system we can.
Monsieur Brown.
Mr. Brown, well, quickly, I'd like to say yes. Canada is losing its leadership in terms of being a place of choice. And when you look in terms of diversification and of the different countries that people are coming from, and the refusal rates, high refusal rates for Francophone countries. So I think that there's quite a reform going on with the indigenous education system, and I think that the people really are interested, but unfortunately I think we're losing our leadership position, especially for African countries. Thank you very much, Mr. Brown. I think that it's unanimous with that, what we've seen. So another question, what is the solution to stop this loss? You are at the head as a decision maker. What do you think would be the best measures? Maybe Madame Bezos to start?
I think there are some practical operational issues that need to be addressed. And the question about really unpacking what is happening with the discretionary aspects of decision-making, this is something that certainly needs to be explored. As I mentioned in my speaking comments initially, I think there needs to be algorithms that we're currently using to screen candidates to make sure that there is no
1 minute
bias.
left.
And I think further, as we look at the processes related to how we're in fact engaging, I think there is more work to be done to make sure that there isn't any kind of structural bias that exists within those kinds of processes. And so there are some concrete solutions and ways in which we can address that. Blind review, looking at ways in which we can compare identical cases across visa centers to make sure that we are saying a consistent approach and one that is in alignment with Canadian values across the globe. Thank you.
Merci, Madame Bezos. Monsieur Davidson, rapidement.
Thank you, Madame Bezos. Mr. Davidson, you have a short answer. I don't know if that can be said in a few words.
I would concur with Larissa's comments about the frontline operational realities. Very important we invest in that, very important that we train in that, very important that it align with the policy intent. I guess the additional comment I would make is we've shown...
Madame la Présidente, je n'ai pas d'interprétation.
Je m'excuse.
Oui, là, ça
You
fonctionne.
can just repeat the last few sentences. I think there was some interpretation issue. Yeah, please go ahead.
And I want to concur with what Larissa has just said about the frontline operational issues. We need to invest in those front lines. We need to train in those front lines. We need to make sure that they are aligned with the policy intent of the Government of Canada. The other thing I want to illustrate is that over the decades, the higher education sector working together with the federal government and provincial governments has demonstrated that we
can please wrap up.
Attract students from new markets in a big way. And in particular, Francophone Africa is an opportunity for all of Canada to realize.
Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you.
Thank you.
To MP Ali. MP Ali, you will have 5 minutes for your round of questioning. You can please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you all witnesses for being here. My question is to all witnesses. As you know, Canada is in a competition to entice people from around the world to come to study in Canada. We ask them to spend enormous amount of money to do so. Among the inducement we offer them to study in Canada is the opportunity to work part-time while studying, and the opportunity to stay in Canada to complete their studies, and to work in Canada as part of a pathway to permanent residence, and ultimately citizenship. Recently, a couple of cases of applicants from Pakistan came to my attention. IRCC refused one of the application on the grounds that it was not satisfied that the student would leave Canada following their studies, based on 4 reasons, namely, quote, the limited employment prospect in your country of residence, your current employment situation, the purpose of your visit, your family ties in Canada, and in your country of residence. My question is, isn't it this exactly type of person who we expect to respond to our recruitment efforts? In the other case, the applicant had completed a BA in business and wanted to come to Canada to study for an MBA. The IRCC officer wrote, quote, submissions do not provide a compelling explanation of why the applicant seeks to pursue master management for future career path. And quote, the officer notes also state that applicants, quote, seeks study at a Christian university when a passport of applicant states religion as Islam. And submission of applicant do not address the divergence of religious belief, end quote. In Ontario, it is not considered unusual that some non-Catholic families, including some Muslim families, prefer to send their children to Catholic separate schools. Doesn't it seem like sometime we are sabotaging our own effort to attract international students? What would you suggest to address these issues? Thank you.
I'll jump in, and I'm sure Larissa and Francis will want to join as well. Just to say, I think those very real life examples are very pertinent to the committee. Of course, we're not going to comment on individual circumstances, but they give you a flavor of what students are experiencing, to go back to an earlier question in this conversation. Again, this comes back to, we can have political commitment, and we do. All parties in the House are supportive of positive immigration for Canada, which is really a good thing and a competitive thing. So we've got political support. We've got policy support in that we've got a very attractive pathway for international students to come to Canada, to study, to work, to study and stay. International competitors are looking at our tools and they're copying them and they're making them more generous. So we have to stay concurrent. But then we've got the operational realities of visa processing times, which is one thing. The integrity of we want to ensure the integrity of the process. But the decision-making authority of the frontline immigration officer is real. We've got to make sure that all staff representing Canada are well trained, have been invested in what we're trying to achieve as a country. Because there was a time, and I've been in this field for over 2 decades now, where we wanted all international students to return to their country of origin. If you even expressed a hint that you wanted to stay, you'd be immediately rejected. And now I think we've got a much more flexible approach, and one that works for Canada's advantage and also for the countries of origin. But those real life examples are, I mean, they're searing. And I'm glad the committee is doing this study, and will be asking IRCC about how they would respond to those kinds of challenges.
You have 50 seconds
like
left.
to jump in?
Sure, perhaps I'll add to what Paul has shared. I agree, and similar to the example you shared, I mean, we have examples of Afghan students who have applied from a third country and told that they're being rejected because they cannot prove that they're going to return to their home country, which, you know, from a sensitivity standpoint, as a country who has opened up a pathway for resettlement, it's problematic. I mean, and there is a very direct human impact. And we know of examples, many of those, where students are applying. And this is multi-year processes where some have applied even 7, 8 times and continually been rejected. And so we need to put those students and these opportunities in context, such that, you know, our
if you can please wrap up.
We're able to be fair and consistent, but we were also treating those students with respect and making sure that the way in which we do this, in fact, contributes to that Canadian brand and reputation abroad.
Sorry for interrupting. Your time is up. We will now proceed to MP Brunel Desep for 2.5 minutes. MP Brunel Desep, you have 2.5 minutes. You can please proceed.
Merci, j'espère que...
Thank you. I hope you're not hearing all of the horns. We got a response from the government yesterday, and I just want to see what Mr. Mastroianni thinks of this, and if the other witnesses want to add something. So first of all, the refusal rates are much higher now for students applications in Quebec and elsewhere in Canada. Also, that's one conclusion. And also, the processing timelines are systematically much longer when it comes to immigration in Canada with respect to everywhere else in Canada. And thirdly, the refusal rates the acceptance rate is higher for Anglophone students for elsewhere in Canada. So really, is the problem, is this a bias that we have here within the immigration system for foreign students, especially for Francophone students? So I will react. Yes, this is a question we're really asking. Is there not discrimination happening here? Depending on which country of origin the applicants are coming from. So we've seen statistics for CIGIPs, and you can see that these are the highest refusal rates especially when we want to bring in students from Francophone countries, and I'm excluding Western Europe from those statistics. For us, it's really this refusal rate is a problem, and this is something that has existed before the pandemic and before the introduction of the automated system. And so it's the same thing for processing times. It's excessively long. I mentioned that you don't get your news, and it takes a lot of time. We've seen more funding has gone into that. That's great, but we're still in a reaction process. So we always have to wait till we get a backlog of 1.8 million applications before something is done. So yes, we can see that the acceptance rates are higher for Anglophone applications than for Francophone applications. Question. So what you're saying is that Quebec is being penalized because they have a different education system from the rest of Canada. Well, that is one of our hypotheses. Yes, our system is a little different.
We will now proceed to MP Kwan. MP Kwan, you will have 2.5 minutes for your round of questioning. You can please proceed.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. My question is for Mr. Davidson. One of the issue, of course, for universities and institutions is to attract new talent. And then, of course, I think part of it is to retain the new talent as well. So to that end, to the idea of bringing forward a new immigration measure that would not only attract students, but also to provide them with permanent residence status as a stream, and particularly in this case for Francophone Africans or students, if you will, because we also need to actually attract and retain Francophone speakers in Quebec as well as outside of Quebec. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm really glad you raised the issue of both attracting and retaining students. And again, Canada has done some remarkably innovative things over recent years to increase the eligibility to work while you're a student, which not only provides income, but gives you work experience and work integrated learning opportunities while you're here. We've also extended through the postgraduate work permits the opportunities for people to really plan to be in Canada for a period of time, and frankly, to put down roots while they're here. There are also some really innovative programs in conjunction with the private sector. I think of the Halifax Partnership in Nova Scotia, which works with international students from the day they arrive in Canada to show them the opportunities and benefits of staying in Canada. We've also benefited over the last several years of the alignment of federal and provincial governments in Atlantic Canada to really make international students an engine for economic renewal in Atlantic Canada. In fact, I've heard some people speak of Canada's universities as being the Peer 21 of the 21st century. So not only attracting people, but integrating them into Canadian life and making this a very attractive place for them to live, to work, and to raise a family.
So would you support then the call that Ms. Basil was advancing, and that is the idea of creating a new immigration stream for international students, in this instance, targeted toward the
30 seconds left.
Franco-African community for PR status?
I think we've always got to be alert to new mechanisms, new policies that will enhance our competitiveness globally on this. I think there are huge opportunities with regard to Francophone students from Francophone Africa and elsewhere. I would note the large percentage of international students that go on with a postgraduate work permit who proceed to permanent residency. And that's a good path that we've created. There may be other ways we can explore going forward. And I'm delighted that this committee is so interested in this subject.
Thank you. Your time is up. We will now end our second round of questioning with MP Gordon and MP Dhaliwal. So each one of you will have 4 minutes for your round of questioning. MP Gordon, you will have 4 minutes.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to continue with Mr. Brown for my last question. What do you think will be the solution to stop this problem? But I do have another question following that. Answer, well, I'll try and answer quickly. Well, thank you for asking that question again. I think that we need to go through with the really in-depth analysis as to the procedural issues that are happening with the immigration, and that we don't see it with just the refusal rate. So there's a question of transparency. I think we should how that should be taken a look at with the immigration system. And thirdly, we're talking about different ways to solve this problem and different pathways to permanent residencies and immigration. So there's a slew of possible solutions, and I think that there's the RCC on the one hand, and then we also have to be able to really explain our issues. So I think that the dialogue has to be there between the educational institutions and the IRCC. Well, thank you, Mr. Brown. I think then this is my opinion, a personal opinion, but I would just want to have the idea of the experts. You know that, yes, there is an economic impact, but there's also an economic impact for the institutions. If there's less students, you have less revenue, and then the programs will be cut. So is this not a way that we're trying to stop the progression of French? So, Mr. Brown, I think that I don't think that there's really we're really getting more students. I don't think there's an effort to try and stop it. But it's a question of really being able to respond to the demand that is there, and so I think that it's a question of technical issues. So I think that we want to see some solutions.
This comment, I agree. I mean, if this is complex and there are many elements to this kind of puzzle, but if we really want to have impact in our communities and think about the critical role that our institutions can play as those anchors, both social, economic, and otherwise, we really need to focus on conversations that focus around, better alignment, not only about community needs, labor market needs, aligning that with IRCC's immigration goals, dealing with the operational issues around visa processing, including any potential unintended bias or any chances in terms of consistent approaches to processing, such that those don't serve as barriers to our future growth and prosperity as a country, and certainly at a provincial and community level as well.
Monsieur Davidson.
Mr. Davidson, can we hear your opinion?
1 minute left.
Thank you, Madam Chair. What we have is an opportunity for communities large and small across the country. And I would pick up on Larissa's point about the alignment between the federal government, the provincial governments, the local communities, what their needs are. Because you're absolutely right, Mr. Godin, that by having international students in your community, you increase the number of opportunities for your domestic students. You can run the second lab. You can run a broader array of courses. You can encourage those students to develop relationships with people around the world. And that's good for Canada. That's good for Quebec. It's good for Francophone minority communities as well.
Merci, très cher.
Thank you very much to the witnesses. I do appreciate your answers. I've finished my round.
Thank you. We will now end our today's panel with Mr. Dhaliwal. Mr. Dhaliwal, you have 4 minutes. Yes, I see a hand raised by MP Kwan. Yes, Ms. Kwan.
Madam Chair, before we end the meeting, I'd like to just raise one issue before we end the meeting, please.
Okay. We will now proceed to Mr. Dhaliwal. Mr. Dhaliwal, you have 4 minutes. You can please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, last year our Liberal government brought in, the landmark immigration policy to help students. When we look at the 90,000 applications that were brought in, and also 27,000 express entry applications, so it was a great help. And the intent of the government is to get all the students into the PR stream and then into the citizenship. But I still keep on hearing from students from countries like Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Bangladesh that they are discriminated based on in the country of origin, and the visas are rejected. And we have a dual intent that the students that is going to come here to study and then get into the PR and to the citizenship stream. So why they are rejected, how the government can bring in a consistent policy that, particularly the reason that earlier was mentioned, that they're not going to go back to their country, they should not be rejected based on that. Any of the witnesses?
I'm happy to jump in. Thank you for the question. I think there are some very concrete operational elements that could be introduced to address some of the concerns that you raised in terms of perceived barriers or perceived potentially systemic challenges. One simple way of assessing if there are systemic problems in some of those visa offices, some of the country examples that you cited, is to have IRCC analysts from other regions complete a blind review of a sample of applications that have been either favorably or unfavorably processed to ensure that there's concordance on the findings. Another option could be perhaps initiate a pilot where you enable candidates of high rejection regions, and even thinking about our colleagues in Francophone Africa, to appeal decisions where there are obvious errors of fact, such as instances where scholarship holders are told that they have the lack of financial resources to pay for their stay, as one example. Simply requiring candidates to just resubmit their applications is not enough. And another would be regularly having IRCC analysts from across a number of regions review identical cases and compare outcomes. And if there is no consensus on the results, then this highlights that there is a need for new types of training on intercultural competence and perhaps other areas of processing where discretion is factored into these decisions. I think these are very simple examples, but ways in which we can really move some of this forward in constructive ways. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, please.
Si je peux ajouter, parce que je suis entièrement.
If I could add, because I do agree with what has just been said, there is an increase in the number of applications, but does the IRCC have the resources necessary? The officers are really overburdened, and I think that's a question you need to look at. And also this type of neutral verification, yes, I think that is a good mechanism to evaluate the situation. And I think that there needs to be training for the officers so that they can understand the issues and they can see what's going on with Francophone Africa, Bangladesh, and other countries.
I want to concur with my colleague witnesses. And I also want to express thanks for the recognition of what the Government of Canada has done through the pandemic, because Canada has really done an extraordinary job against some circumstances. And the fact that our international pathways have remained open is almost unique in the world. It's taken a lot of work from the sector, from provinces, from public health authorities, and from the federal government to iterate in real time. So let's not lose sight of the good work that's being done, but let's set our sights even higher going forward.
On the other hand, universities have generated a great deal of revenue from the students. Besides increasing from 20 hours.
Sorry for interrupting, Mr. Dhaliwal. Your time is up. So,
Madam Chair, thank you.
Sorry for interrupting, but I have to keep everyone on time. So thank you to our witnesses for appearing before the committee today. And if there is something which you would like to bring it to committee's notice and you were not able to discuss it today, you can always send written submissions to the clerk of the committee, and that can be considered by the members when we are going through the report. So before we adjourn, a quick question from Ms. Kwan. Yes, Ms. Kwan.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Based on the presentations from the witnesses and the nature of our study, I think it'd be very helpful if the clerk or the analysts could reach out to IRCC and to the ministry to obtain some statistics and the breakdown of the rejection rates as it relates to our study. I think it'd be very useful for us to have that information for consideration as we move forward. We received some statistics from individual presenters, but I think we should have a holistic picture from IRCC. And since Ms. Basil used the date 2016 in terms of 500,000 rejection rates, I think that maybe we can start with data starting from 2016 in the rejection rates and the breakdown of the countries and where those rejection rates are, and then specifically related to Quebec, how many of those are in the province of Quebec. I think that would really help us as we move forward with the study.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Kwan. Quickly to Mr. Brunel Desep. Yes, Mr. Brunel Desep.
Well, the Bloc Québécois is always wanting to help, and so we have been able to get those statistics. So and so I'm very glad to say that we can support this, getting the answers to our questions for the committee.
Thanks, Mr. Brunel Desep, for your offer. Mr. Ali.
Hi, Madam Chair. Thank you for the opportunity. I just wanted to raise one concern. When the witness is talking, I think we should have a better way of informing them rather than cutting them off. Maybe we can have, watch or something so that indicates how many dealing with that. Thank you.
Minute warning to everyone. So I'll have some like 2 minute, 1 minute, 30-second cards to show it to everyone. So thank you, everyone. And on Ms. Kwan's suggestion, I will work with the clerk to see what data we can get from the department, and if whatever information we get, we will circulate it among the members. So thank you to our witnesses for appearing before the committee and giving your input in regards to the study which we have started. So is it the pleasure of the committee to adjourn the meeting? Yes. Okay, so the meeting is adjourned.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Merci à vous tous, chers témoins.
Merci à toutes et tous. Merci.
See you Thursday.
Merci, au plaisir.
Merci.
Bye. Au revoir.
Au revoir.